Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino De Cespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
Feeling all right, buddy. I feel like it's been a little while since we've done this, but I'm happy to get back. It's been a pretty busy transfer season, trade deadline season thus far, both here in the U.S. and abroad. I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Let's go. I'm excited too. Quick programming reminder though. January, we're going to bounce around Europe a little bit. I know the football's been slow, but it's slowly starting to simmer, starting to bubble a little bit. Liga F has already kicked back off this weekend. Lyon at PSG, Saturday. Let's fucking go. Sign me up for that. Chelsea, City, Arsenal, all back in action on Sunday. A lot of women's FA Cup action, but WSL back proper next weekend. As mentioned, that's the game plan for January until February 7th. We return live on YouTube after the UEFA Women's Champions League quarterfinals draw, so be sure you're subscribed for that. Champions League kicks back off March 18th and 19th. We've got some poll results, my friend. Our ITC 2024 Best 11 draft. You edged me out by a single vote.
Amazing. Let's go.
I won the vote on Twitter. You needed some votes to come through on Threads, and you got me by one. So congratulations to you, the winner of the ITC 2024 Better Best 11.
I appreciate you being gracious in a narrow defeat, a hard-fought battle. You picked a great team yourself, my good man. Now we're 1-1 in the Lifetime Series. I look forward to doing it again next year, but I will still say our combined Best 11, absolutely the better 11 compared to any women's football podcast in the universe. I'll put us up against anybody.
Dominant. Yeah, we crushed it. But yeah, with that said, enough patting ourselves on the back. Mr. Grant Engel, where do you want to get started?
I want to get started with a frosty beverage because, as you said, the football's starting to trickle back. The news is coming in thick and fast as well.
Frothy, you might say.
I agree. So let's get started with the big news that broke this weekend. I don't think there's any other place to get started with us living in the United States of America than superstar attacking player Jaedyn Shaw being traded to the North Carolina Courage.
Unreal. I mean,
huge.
Sent shockwaves, I think. I think the window had been a little quiet and a little, it's like, all right, some interesting stuff here. But I think we kind of were hyping some stuff up a little bit bigger than was warranted. But this Jaedyn Shaw move, I mean, it knocked my socks off. You look at the deal as reported by Jeff Kassoff, shout out to Jeff, for cash. And this is a player that turned 20 years old in November. So she's 10 months away from her 21st birthday. An absolute superstar. Kind of sold off by the same wave side that broke the league record on the buy side last year with the Maria Sanchez deal, $500K. Tough to know exactly what's going on in San Diego. But I wanted to kind of have a little mini U.S. Women's National Team conversation because of all the players yet to hit their prime. Jaedyn Shaw, where would you rank Jaedyn Shaw amongst all of the players in the USWT universe pre-prime?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so let's think about the pool. So Croy Bethune, fair to say, not yet in her prime. Hel Hirschfeld, not yet in her prime. Man, is Naomi Girma, are we sure she's in her prime? How old is she? Quick fact check.
25?
24 years old. Will turn 25 on June 14th. So, I mean, she's entering her prime. Let's maybe not count her just because she's so close to her prime. If we're talking like the younger players. And then you have that, I hear there's a pretty good young midfielder who plays for Ajax, who is nowhere near her prime yet and already looks like one of the most talented players on the roster. She's got to be near the very top of the list. I think the thing with Shaw that can confound me at times, and she's been great, and she will continue to be great, I firmly believe that, is that sometimes, I know Shaw has said publicly she prefers to play as a number 10, and I think she fits in that role. But she has such good attacking skill that sometimes she looks like a little more of like 9-ish, like 9.5 or 10, and like you're not really sure where to throw her. And then we've seen her kind of, when she's been placed on the wing, she kind of disappears. So you got to figure out where exactly to play her. And I think a good midfield partner is going to be really key for her. So this is my rambling, babbling way of not directly answering your question of if she has the highest ceiling of any player who hasn't hit their prime. I think it's got to be between her, Bethune, and Johannes. Who am I forgetting?
Trinity Rodman still.
Jesus. Okay,
She's
she's the answer.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I had her. I also jotted her down third. And I'm just like, oh, obviously, like, but she's so good, and
Yeah,
it's like, how is that player not in her prime? Like, how could you even
that's
get better than
crazy.
this?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think still 22
Hmm.
for Trinity. But to get back to the Shaw news, this Shaw move comes a few days after the club announces Jonas Eidevall as their new manager,
Hmm.
coming off, I mean, a rocky few years at Arsenal. Eidevall had tremendous success at Rosengard, but over the 3 years that Jonas spent at Arsenal, they seem to fall further and further behind Chelsea. I did watch a Jonas interview. I can see how his delivery, it's kind of like very Dutch, could get a little, grating, I think, over some
Hmm.
time. I'm really curious with everything going on in San Diego, what that's going to be like, having that voice, trying to quell things, calm things down, and maybe start to rebuild. I'm not sure about the fit there.
You lose Alex Morgan, who is one of the most important players in the history of women's football, period, let alone the U.S. women's national team program,
Great point.
let alone U.S. soccer, the NWSL in general. You have this super rocky season. There are legal troubles. There are accusations of a toxic culture. You bring in Adevall, and I think you're right. I think sometimes his delivery, I think people look at him that he has a little bit of an arrogance to him. And obviously, like you said, the guy had a great run at Rosengard. He obviously understands football. I don't know, man. It feels like if we're the famous Into the Channel segment during the NWSL season, arrows pointing up, arrows pointing down. I know they got Maria Sanchez. I know they signed Delphine Cascarino. I don't know, man. Is the arrow at best pointing sideways for the San Diego Wave?
It's probably spinning like a clock in Alice in Wonderland, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah,
But I know that they did pick up another couple players in lieu of the NWSL draft
sure.
that were pretty highly rated. We'll learn a lot about those players coming up here. But I'd be a little confused, with these moves and kind of like where the team might be headed. Shaw is just such. I mean, there's no telling where Shaw's ceiling is. So that right there
Yeah.
is, I mean, borderline, like that's, that could be franchise derailing, especially if she just becomes, the 1A for U.S. women's national team, which is not a 0% chance. She's an excellent player.
Right.
Adevall got some huge shoes to fill, obviously stepping in for Landon Donovan, who put together 3 wins, 1 draw, 7 losses.
Uh-huh. Nicely done.
But yeah, we'll keep an eye on them. So let's loosely do some winners and losers. I'm going to go flat out and just say it. San Diego Wave, my first loser of the window. Hated this move. Not sure where they're headed. You feel free to at me at ITC Dino. But yeah, I'll kick it to you. Where do you want to go from here?
I'm going to go with a winner first. I'm going to try to make this a little more positive, although I like it. The honesty is important. We're journalists here. We're just calling it as we see it. I'll go with my first winner, to the surprise of everybody watching this program, Manchester City Football Club. Why, do you ask? Not because I'm a supporter of that club.
No.
I'm going with them because they signed 28-year-old German center back Rebecca Knock from the Damelsvenskan champions FC Rosengard, previously mentioned, related to Jonas Eidevall. She's a 5'9" defender of the year from the Damelsvenskan, who also happened to score 12 goals for the champs in the 2024 season. She has the ability to play center back or defensive midfielder. She could push up and maybe partner nicely with Yui Hasegawa at times, and it looks like she's going to have to serve as the replacement for Alex Greenwood while City tries to get things back on track. This really just kind of jumped out to me as like, okay, let's get not just a Band-Aid for the Greenwood injury, but get a player who is, speaking of players in their prime, she's, like I said, she's 28. Get a player in her prime who is actually familiar with a system similar to what City plays. City's director of football is Swedish legend and one of the most capped players in the history of Sweden's national team, Teresa Wegran. I think I'm pretty close on the last name. It might be Wegran. I digress. She was formerly the sporting director at Rosengard. She knows what Knock is capable of, and I think City's really going to need that help, and so I was just very pleased to see him pick her up.
Love that. Pretty smart. I mean, from what I know about Knock's game, pretty versatile as well. Could play her in different spots and tons of experience and tons of winning experience. Love to see players from winning programs move over, and then have to step into a big spot. Do you have any other winners, losers, WSL wise?
In the WSL, yeah, I do have another winner. Let's go with Everton Football Club, those plucky underdogs. Currently sitting at 9th in the table, but they're 4 points and 8 goals in goal differential above Crystal Palace, who's in the relegation zone. I just like that Everton is still kind of trying to push forward. They're only a few points back of Tottenham, who's sitting in 6th. I think Tottenham is 2 points and maybe a goal or two ahead of them in goal differential. So I like Everton's idea here. So they went out and they picked up 31-year-old veteran midfielder Hayley Ladd. She's a Welsh midfielder from Manchester United. She wasn't getting much playing time. It kind of dwindled toward the end of her time there, I believe. But I like Everton adding some experience depth in the midfield. That experience is going to be balanced out by 18-year-old Scottish midfielder Emma Watson, who they're loaning from those same Red Devils over at Manchester United. Watson was playing in the Scottish Women's Premier League for Rangers when she was like 15 years old.
Wow.
At that point, I think either that year or the year after, she was nominated for the SWPL's Youth Player of the Year in the 21-22 season. She left Rangers as a free agent, signed with United, injured her ACL in 2023, but she's on the mend. She made a couple appearances in the WSL, got some burn in the League Cup, scored a goal against Newcastle. I like Everton taking some swings, like let's bring in some young players who aren't getting playing time at their other clubs. And that leads us to 20-year-old Spanish center back Martina Fernandez from Barcelona. Pretty good club to pick a player from if you have your options. She played the full 90 in 10 Liga F matches for Barca in the 23-24 season, played another full 90 versus Rosengard. A lot of Rosengard content in this show in last year's Champions League. So I think if you're Everton and you want to try to like scoot your way up from like the bottom of the table, I like these moves, just kind of trying to add some depth and trying to just add depth, add experience, but then take some flyers on some players who you can kind of develop while they're young and make a difference on the field.
Yeah, totally agree. Rosengard getting a lot of burn today. I think there might be a drinking game there. Speaking of Fernandez, scored a goal against the aforementioned Rosengard. So here we go. Cheers.
There it is. Cheers to Rosengard. Cheers to these delicious beers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Liverpool also picked up Bayern Munich's Samantha Kerr, the other Sam Kerr, however you want to think about that. 25-year-old Scottish midfielder, 8 appearances this season, 13 last season for the Frauen Bundesliga champs. Chelsea extended Guro Reiten to 2026. Yasmin to Real Madrid, 28-year-old left back. 4 league championships for Yasmin as part of that Corinthians squad in Brazil. Was excited for my Blancos. What do you think about that Yasmin deal?
Like it. Impressive defender, previously for the perennial champions of Brazil, Corinthians. Looked really impressive in the She Believes Cup, looked good in the Olympics. Sneaky move. Anytime you see a Brazilian player go to Real Madrid, you got to keep an eye on that.
Agreed. Excited to see how she fits into, because I think she's got the creativity. I think you could drop a player like that right in, again, in her prime. You mentioned that 28-year-old, sweet spot of super experience, still has all the physical tools. One more European move that I wanted to mention, Elma Untila Nelhag from BK Häcken, the 21-year-old center back. She moves over to Lyon as if they needed any more defensive help. That back line is just going to be so nasty. Speaking of nasty, a tough player, was involved in everything defensively. And, you just can't help but think about that Champions League run last year where they were just impossible to score on. Nelhag, obviously a huge part of that.
Yeah, I mean, she stands somewhere in the vicinity of 5'10". She played in 20 Damallsvenskan matches, netted 2 goals last season. Man, you got to wonder, does this mean that Lyon thinks that when Vanessa Gilles' loan ends in the summer, I believe after the Champions League final would be played, does Angel City FC want Vanessa Gilles back? And then what happens with the dance of, if you're Vanessa Gilles, do you want to go back to Angel City? Would you prefer to stay in Lyon? I don't know if signing Elma Untila Nelhag is insurance for Vanessa Gilles leaving. Is it insurance for Wendy Renard continuing, even though she's like just in her late prime now, is after she was in her prime for so many years? Is it insurance to create a Gilles Nelhag center back duo? I'm not sure what it's going to look like. It definitely piqued my interest though when they picked her up. I thought, they've done it again, but who's leaving and when?
Fair questions to ask for sure. My first thought was they recognize that their defense is special.
Yeah.
And, you love when you think about team building to invest in your strength, like make your strength stronger and just make that more of an advantage against the opponent. You can kind of see how they think they want to like run through this Champions League season, and they believe in their players up front to be able to, create with less numbers up top.
Yeah.
Love the move though. I mean,
yeah, it's great.
Tremendous player. And you can totally see her fitting in,
no doubt,
with any of those with any combination of those defenders alongside her. So really excited about that. Let's shift gears though. I want to head back to the NWSL. I've got one more loser and a couple more winners, but I'll kick it to you. Where do you want to go from here?
This team cannot possibly be a loser because we talked about them at the top. I'm going to call them the team I'm watching the most closely for the rest of the window. The North Carolina Courage. So yes, you acquire Jaedyn Shaw. That's a huge coup. Kassoff said it should be, I believe his exact terminology was a substantial sum of money, which sounds about right when you get a player, like you said, who's not even anywhere near her prime yet. But I think what I'm really interested in is they lost Narumi Mura, defensive midfielder who is a critical part of Sean Nahas's like possession-based style. She's going to be hard to replace in that defensive midfielder spot. I mean, Mira's been a stalwart defensive midfielder for the Courage the last 2 seasons. She's played more than 60 matches across all comps in these last 2 years. In the 2024 season, she was top 10 in passes into the final third, progressive passes, and through balls. She was number 4 in the league in tackles and number 3 in the league in tackles won. You're just going to have a really hard time replacing that player. And obviously, bringing in Shaw, that's not like for like whatsoever. So you still have some questions to answer in that position. But the other piece that is looming over their head that I'm very curious, after they spend, in Kassoff's words, a substantial sum of money to bring in Shaw, the 2023 NWSL MVP, Lyn, the Brazilian threatening winger, has not yet been signed. She is a free agent. And I gotta think you really, really, really want to bring her back. Remember they signed Australian speedster Courtney Vine last year. You could have Vine,
Yep.
Shaw, and Lyn on the field at the same time. I don't know if that's in the plans, though, and that's what has me watching them so closely.
I think Ashley Sanchez, you got to mention as well,
Yeah,
re-included back into the U.S. Women's National Team January camp roster, but that's a fearsome 4 up top.
yeah,
And they still have Kurtz, they still have Williams on the defense. They still have an identity and a culture defensively.
for sure.
That I think that always goes a long way when they know how they want to play. It's just like it's basically written on the walls of the building. So I'm kind of pulling for them to get Caroline back. I think they could be really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it because it's super early, but I'm going to take a long look at the Courage when I start making some predictions for my 2025 season. They have sort of like sleeping giant potential. This Shaw move could be absolutely massive. And usually when you're making a move like this, obviously you want to grab that superlative talent, but it's because you see something there that you're willing to sort of fork over that substantial, sum of money, however Kassoff put it.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm jotting notes down pretty furiously. I think the Courage could sneak into my my 2025 postseason predictions.
I love it. Let me take this opportunity. I'm going to put, and this is not exactly a bold prediction, but let me just take one sports take chip and put it on the roulette wheel of 20-year-old forward Manaka Matsukoba, who the Courage re-signed. She hasn't put up big numbers in the NWSL yet, but she gets herself into dangerous areas. She can create highlight plays. She helped Japan win the silver in the U20 World Cup last year. She won the silver ball for the tournament's second best player. We're talking about a lot of forwards here in Sean Nahas's like defensive kind of, maybe not even so much defensive, but possession-based football. If you have players who can then just create highlight plays or can just break the game open with speed while you're holding possession, that sounds a lot like a team that will challenge for the title.
They still got some work to do, but I think they're putting it together in a way that
Yeah.
that I like. You mentioned Narumi Miura going to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that means for that Spirit side? Did they do anything else big of note that we need to kind of zoom in on a little bit more?
If North Carolina Courage are going to challenge for the title, we already know they got to go through the champs, the Orlando Pride. But on their way there, they're going to have to go through the Washington Spirit. I think extremely highly of Mira. If you look at that midfield rotation now obviously Croy Bethune has to come back and get healthy, but let's think about some players in the center of the park. You might have Ashley Hatch up top at that number 9 position, but in that midfield, you're going to have Mira and Hirschfeld in the defensive midfield. But then you think about your more forward-looking players. You're going to have Trinity Rodman, Rosemont Kawasi, and Lacey Santos, and possibly Croy Bethune running around in midfield. And then you still have McKenna Morris, who came on strong, especially toward the end of last season, who can also fill in some gaps defensively and get forward if you need her to, or at least help distribute the ball. I think you have to really take a hard look. I think Spirit are going to be back in the absolute mix. I think that kind of goes without saying. That's not exactly a bold take, but I think when we're making our predictions, far be it from me to go against Barbara Benda and the greatest player who ever lived, Marta. But man, I think the Spirit have a real chance to win the title, and when I say win the title, obviously we mean the NWSL Shield, but also win the NWSL Championship game as well.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's 2 teams to beat, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, because Mura and Giraldes is, I mean, what a pairing
Perfect.
that is. Like,
Perfect.
her footwork and just how quickly she'll pivot and turn and have the decision already made. I mean, Giraldes is gonna feast on her skill set.
Yeah.
And then you think about Bethune doing a lot of the same stuff, but more with, like, the offensive tilt, but, a lot of the same twitchy skill set. Yeah, if we're thinking super early predictions, I feel pretty confident that there's 2 teams to beat going into next season, Orlando and the Spirit.
100%. We haven't even mentioned Ole Sarr yet. And then
Mhm.
I also want to point out for this window, they signed 21-year-old Brazilian forward Tamara Bolt. She had nearly 50 appearances with Internacional and scored 8 goals down in Brazil. I will say, I don't have the opportunity to watch a lot of Brazilian league play, but Bolt stands 5'9", and we just have to operate in the space of, I think, what does Jonathan Giraldes know? What does he and his staff know when they go down there and pick up a 21-year-old Brazilian forward? I think people should be very watchful of that, and I'm sure every team in the league is.
Scary stuff. Yep. Jonathan Giraldes, ITC Best 11 2024 manager. Yeah. However you want to say that. But he was
That's
he was
about
our
right.
guy last season. So shout out to him. I want to talk a little bit about Gotham. This is my next loser.
Wow. Okay.
So I know that a ton of moving and shaking from their part. And then we'll get into the Lyn Williams move heading to Seattle. This is from Lyn Williams' appearance on Samuel's podcast immediately following the news breaking that she had been traded. So here's the Lyn Williams quote. Looking at the culture that's there, speaking of Gotham, I don't want to get into everything with the end at Gotham, but I'm really excited to be a part of a team that looks like they're enjoying each other and having fun, and a culture that looks like it's a healthy, fun, loving environment to be around. And I think that's super important. At the end of the day, it is a game, it is a sport, and we should be having fun doing it. I want to be in an area that allows that. End quote.
It's interesting.
Now, before I get your comment on that, now you had a couple players go out the door. Delaney Sheehan, Yasmin Ryan, Sam Hyatt. Like, these are like talented players along with Lyn Williams. But the players they acquired, so they acquired Gabby Portillo from obviously an international from Corinthians, Jalen Howell via trade, and then Jessica Silva pretty much on a short termer. Looks like she might be headed back to Europe.
Yeah.
Didn't quite, hit her top speed, I would say, at Gotham.
Right.
But it doesn't look like there's a lot of good players pining to head to New York, but a real talent drain if you look at those 3 or 4 players out the door.
Yeah, man, I think that was very curious. I mean, once you say, I'm not going to get into everything that was happening there,
Mm-hmm.
I know it can be easy for like people like us or like people in the media to just kind of like parse every single thing that an athlete says. Lyn Williams is on a podcast with her good pal, Sam Mewis. I'm sure they discussed this ahead of time. I'm sure Lyn Williams thought a great deal about what she was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to kind of refer to that situation in those murky terms kind of sets off the alarm bells a little bit.
Yeah, usually kind of where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think we're starting to see some of the organizations really start to bubble up to the top.
Yeah.
That have either infrastructure or culture or better leadership or however you want to think about that. And the next team I want to talk about is interesting because it does look like, could they be turning a corner? And that's the Houston Dash.
Let's go.
I'm feeling emotional about this team. I'm not ready to say they're my tricky trees of the of the NWSL, but I don't know. There's some emojis being exchanged.
There we go. I love it. So look, they, like you mentioned, they acquire Yasmin Ryan, talented 25-year-old midfielder, attacker who played more than 2,000 minutes for the Bats last year, notched 5 goals, 6 assists. Then they pick up Kristen Westphal, veteran defender, 2-time Shield winner, once with Portland, once with San Diego. She played a real role when San Diego won the 2023 Shield. She was top 10 in assists and 3rd in the league in blocks that year. She took a little bit more of a backseat last season. Her playing time kind of dwindled after June. So it's good to see her kind of get like refreshed into this Houston Dash squad. I want to rewind to when we went on the great Leanne Sanderson's show, the women's football show. You should subscribe to that podcast immediately. We talked about the Houston Dash. And one thing that I had mentioned to Leanne was I was openly wondering, with the abolition of the NWSL draft, how is Houston going to get themselves out of the basement when they now don't have the advantage of, I get to pick the very top rated player out of the NCAA here in the United States. And it looks like with Sheehan, Westfall, and Ryan, they're making some real moves to dig themselves out of there.
Totally agree with that. I mean, we talked at the top about Jaedyn Shaw and where her prime might top out.
Yeah.
And both in agreement that we're still a good ways away from that. I feel like Yasmin Ryan at 25, still a player on the ascent, getting better year after year. For Gotham, she was third in shots this year. This is a ton of talent for Gotham to head out the door.
Yeah.
Second in passes into the penalty area. That's a lot of productivity that you lost. Third in crosses into the penalty area. So just a dangerous, creative player, a player that's really going to connect some stuff and then also put the ball in the back of the net, on occasion for Houston. Sorely needed. But yeah, I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited about the season too. I mean, you look at it, when is it? March 7th for the Challenge Cup, Pride versus Spirit going down in Orlando. We're less than 2 months away from that. I mean, excited to get to it.
There we go. Get your big body cars with the candy coated paint ready down in Houston.
Let's go.
We might have to take a visit down there. That is a great city, great food city, awesome music, great culture. Oh, yeah. Love it down there. We have to go check out some Houston Dash matches.
That'd be incredible. Not in the summer though, so maybe early season.
Oh fuck, it's hot there.
Season,
yeah, that's true.
Late season when the stakes are high. Let's go. Also, shout out to Fabrice Gautrat, signed as their manager. Spent 3 years as an assistant in the NWSL, 1 for the Chicago Red Stars, 2 for the North Carolina Courage. Playoffs all 3 seasons for Fabrice. So excited to see what he's going to be able to put together there. Any other NWSL news, moves, and shakes that we got to hit before we get out of here?
Well, I think that we have a couple more teams to discuss as I sit here in Seattle, Washington. I will say, you mentioned Lyn Williams, leg sleeve Lyn, as she's also known, coming to the Seattle Reign up here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. That's great. I think one of the sneaky early moves really wasn't that sneaky. I think real hoopers knew. Signing Madison Curry from Angel City FC is a nice way to kind of bolster the defense, make the defense a little bit younger over here for the Reign. They've been making some pretty good moves. I'm kind of wondering still, could maybe use some attacking midfield help, could probably use some attacking help, but I'm overall feeling pretty good about the moves. How do you feel over there in Florida as a neutral?
I like it. I mean, Lyn Williams is an absolute gamer.
Great.
We've been talking about some of these later in their career, but she doesn't play like it. She just plays like a really good experienced player that's highly productive.
It's true.
It's just going to be a matter of how many minutes, how many matches you'll be able to count on her for this upcoming season. But I think any team would be happy to have her. Love the Curry pickup as well. I think, Seattle, arrow pointing up.
Oh, let's go. All right. I'll take it. They signed a forward out of the University of North Carolina, Maddie Dalian. I'm not going to pretend like I am a women's collegiate football expert by any means. It seemed like some people were fairly excited about that. I will say they're pretty young in some spots. They're very experienced in other spots. It's arrow probably pointing up. You're never going to count out Laura Harvey, who I will say I'm going to chastise Laura Harvey for one thing. Her recruitment pitch to Marta post-match after the Pride won the NWSL championship. Sorry, Laura, you didn't get it done. I know you tried. She told Marta she could name her price if she came and signed with the Reign. Didn't work out this time. Better luck next time, maybe. But I think arrow probably pointing up. I'm going to harp on it a little bit. I would like to see a little more attacking talent in the dressing room, but they still have time to make it happen.
Fair enough. You mentioned Madison Curry, who came over from Angel City FC. Angel City, they pick up Julie DeFore, player that
that was a good one.
We've covered quite a bit here on the show. 23-year-old forward, 6 goals, 5 assists this Premier League season. Shout out to Handle Me Up, one of the ITC community starting 11, let's say, our favorite Curry FC supporter. So shout out. And then you also mentioned, we're not experts on NCAA soccer, but we do have a bunch of them in the audience because we follow you guys back. So let us know who we missed. One more team I want to hit, the Kansas City Current. So they pick up Rocky Rodriguez, 31-year-old Costa Rican midfielder, really experienced, really tough player, maybe a spot starter, someone that might be able to come off the bench. Sure. But I love the toughness angle of this move. And then they also picked up 2 different goalkeepers, Lorena from Brazil, extremely experienced, tons of big matches on her resume, and Laurel Ivory, who you spent some time with in Seattle. You look at where KC struggled last year. 80 French had a rough go, I'll say.
Yes.
17 matches played, 26 goals allowed, 1.53 per match that French was between the posts. That went down to 0.89 once they switched to almost Schultz, who's moved back to Europe, but I think got replaced with two legitimate starting goalkeeping options. And I think between that, the Rocky Rodriguez move, you can kind of see what they're going for in KC. They're looking at where they were lacking last season and making the investments there.
Yeah, I mean, big turnover in Kansas City's goalkeeper room. The team posted on social media goodbyes to, as you mentioned, almost Schultz and 80 French. So I gotta say, you have to expect Lorena walks in and is the undisputed starting goalkeeper. 3 clean sheets in the Olympics, great diving ability, good instincts. But at the same time, not a but. It's more of an and. Lorena has to be your starting goalkeeper. And signing Laurel Ivory, who played well and had to spell Claudia Dickey for I think 8 or 9 matches in the NWSL last season. Laurel Ivory has to be. I mean, I literally like stood next to her at a press conference when she was walking out. She's got to be at least 5'10", might be every bit of 5'11". Good size, good diving ability. Obviously, I watched every single match that she was playing in. I was at all the home matches. There are some times on some crosses over the middle where she was like kind of in between coming off her line or not. You're going to expect that from any goalkeeper. That's bound to happen when you watch him play an extensive amount of time. But her instincts are largely good, and she has some real quick twitch, fast twitch shot stopping ability. So I think they ended up with a really, really strong goalkeeping room. And it's probably worth pointing out that any Kansas City Current fans watching this podcast right now, when you and I said that there are 2 teams to beat, Orlando Pride and Washington Spirit, I feel like some Kansas City Current fans might be raising their hand and be like, oh, hi, we have the MVP of the league, and we're pretty awesome too.
Yeah, that's second tier for me.
Oh, wow, good. Let's go. Let's make this a real sports show. Let's start yelling at each other about it.
Can't have 3 teams to beat. It's ridiculous. Of all the ridiculous things we talk about. No, I do think that they're half a notch below. I think we just saw we saw this play out in the playoffs. I love the moves. I think they improved, but Spirit are scary, and the Pride just kind of have that got to beat the champ to kind of be considered there. We'll see if Bia can come back. Obviously, that was a huge loss for them. If she plays, you could definitely make the case that they're the ones hoisting one, maybe both of those trophies. They look so good at the beginning of the season.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll see.
It's going to be a hell of a season. I mean, we're halfway through, not even halfway through the damn transfer window. And the league looks like it's going to be almost turned on its head in some different ways, even with those top 3 teams looking like juggernauts who are making really smart, savvy moves as well. But like we talked about, you have the Courage bubbling up. With the Bats, it's going to be interesting to see where Gotham starts to fall in this mix. Bay FC is going to come back a little more organized. You see how they bubble up. A lot of stuff going on. I just want to say it's January 11th. It's 8:39 Pacific Standard Time. I don't know if Racing Louisville's made a transaction yet. I think there was a day or 2 ago where they had not made a single transaction. Hey, guys, just if somebody wants to let them know that the transfer window opened, they may want to consider making some moves.
Well, yeah, we'll see. They kind of fallen out of favor with me in terms of my my second team that I bat my eyes at. But it's still early. Maybe they're playing the slow game.
Knowing that I said that, by the time this episode comes out, it's going to be like Racing Louisville signed Aitana Bonmati. And I'm going to be like, oh boy, or scrap the episode.
Yeah. And Sophie Smith and, a couple of monsters. Yeah. All right, man. I think we covered most of the league, most of the big moves. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
No, man, I think for being like right up on the halfway point of the transfer window, I think we've covered most of the stuff. Like you said, I appreciate you putting the bat signal out for our pals who cover Division I or Division II NCAA women's football at the collegiate ranks. Let us know who we forgot to talk about. But I think we mostly did it for now. Obviously, more coverage to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of that, more coverage to come. We're going to bounce around Europe in January. We're going to take a look at Liga F, WSL, Frauen Bundesliga, and the Premier League in France. That all leads to February 7th, where we'll be back live on YouTube immediately after the draw. So you know where to find us. Make sure you're locked in.
Is it going to be immediately after the draw? How early do I have to wake up to be immediately after the draw?
Yeah, it's going to be immediately after the draw. Got to get up early.
How early is too early to crack a beer when you're 39 years old?
No such thing.
Okay. Fair enough.
We're on European time. We're covering the European. It's like 1 in the afternoon.
That's it. Nah, it's totally fair. No, I like it. I appreciate you.
All right, man. I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, commenting, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you liked, subscribe or follow into the channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grant Angle, for co-creating the ITC 91 episodes ago and bringing your substantial sums of talent to the show. I appreciate you, bro.
Likewise, man. 91 episodes in, I think that's a pretty good run. I don't think either of us are transferring anywhere anytime soon. I think our squad right now, solid. We don't need to pick up any talent. We're challenging for the title right now.
I love it. And if we do transfer, we're a two-man pod here. So we're both transferring if we're heading somewhere else.
Damn right. And obviously we would never transfer any of the folks who are always rocking with us. We appreciate you. Thanks for kicking it with us, always dropping knowledge in the comments, and we will see you all next time.